You are here today for on the next slide to see protecting your peace, supporting well-being and resilience during turbulent times. And so we love Lisa Conradi over here at CalTrin. We work with her often. And so she's former executive director of the Chadwick Center, which we absolutely love at CalTrin. We are housed out of Rady Children's Hospital. And the Chadwick Center is the CAC that's within Rady Children's Hospital. And so it kind of says that on the screen for you, but she's partners with individuals and organizations to cultivate leadership practices rooted in resilience, compassion, and nervous system awareness. She's a licensed clinical psychologist with training in multiple evidence-based trauma focused treatment practices and sought after speaker, of course. So we have her here today, and consultant on trauma informed leadership and system transformations. And so now that you've heard my voice for the last, I don't know, 5 or 7 minutes, I guess, I will turn it over to Lisa and we can jump into today's training.
Thank you, Casey. Hi, everybody. It is so fun for me to be here with you. As Casey said, I love doing trainings for CalTrin. I've done several trainings, so hopefully maybe you've been on a training before. This is just really fun to be here. We are going to be talking about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. How do we take care of ourselves and really protect our peace during some crazy times? So, as Casey said, I'm a clinical psychologist. I worked at the Chadwick Center, which is the home of CalTrin, for about 18 years, had lots of different roles there, and eventually was the executive director up until about a year ago. I still do some work and support for Chadwick, but I have my own organization where I do trainings on things that you'll hear more about as we go through today. And really where this work is very special to me because we are in an interesting time in history, and we'll go into that in a moment. So just to kick us off, here's the overview and objectives, the kind of official for CEU purposes, what we're going to be talking about. First, we're going to describe moral distress, what it is, how to recognize it, how it shows up during times of stress and uncertainty. We're also going to talk about 5 symptoms of moral distress that might impact you personally and professionally. Talk about 4 practical strategies to manage it, and some self-care and grounding practices. So what I'm hoping will happen for you today is you'll have an opportunity to do some self-reflection, looking at your own experiences, but also looking at the resources you have available to you to support you through challenging times. So before we dive any deeper, I'd love to have you type in the chat one word on what peace looks or feels like for you today. Faith. Thanks, Jen. Calm, quiet beach. Freedom, safety. Oh, I love it. Serenity, warmth, relaxed, kindness, river time, this moment, self-care at ease. I can't keep up with all of it, but oh my gosh, so many. Jesus, forgiveness, awareness, harmony, reading, love, quiet. Oh my gosh, so many amazing one words. Self-care. And I love that because it's those are all, there's all this research on how words have a salience to them. And so even as I was reading those one word responses, maybe you had the same response I did, where even the word calm helps you feel calm, right? Even the word relaxed elicits a response of feeling just a little bit more relaxed in that moment. And that our brains are wired for that. So I'm just so glad we all have some things that we can hold on to help really protect our peace. So what we're kind of, as we really get into this, one of the areas and I'm going to talk a little bit about where this work came from. But for me, it's really about how peace becomes a source of power. And I think we're living in a time where many of us feel powerless, where we feel like things are happening that we have no control over. And that's true in some ways. But that peace actually is a source of power. And I firmly believe this. And hopefully by the end of today, you'll have a sense of that as well. So, as we think about what our time's really going to look like today, we're going to talk about, as I said, moral distress, how it shows up in our work, and how it might this disruption of values might drain our inner strength, but how we might have those moments where that happens. We're going to talk about grief and how it's a way, understanding grief is a way to understand our reactions to the world and to reclaim our resilience. Because I do think we are going through a time of profound grief, no matter who you are and what your experience is of the world. There's so much changing so quickly. I think we are in a profound state of grief. We're going to talk about resilience strategies that are rooted in connecting to our own deep purpose, to our boundaries, and to self compassion, and how to cultivate practices that restore our energy and agency. And finally, we none of us work in a vacuum. I mean, I'm self-employed, but I also still work with organizations. So, organizational responses to moral distress and how we can build cultures where collective peace fuels collective power. And the framework that we're going to use for this is what I call the 5 Gs of protecting your peace. And we're going to walk through each of these. They're grounding, guiding, guarding, growing, and giving. And this is part of kind of this peace as power model that is really the framework of our time together today. So I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about where this work has come to for me and where it came from and why I think it's so important. So as we mentioned, I've worked for years at Chadwick as a children's advocacy center. I'm a trauma psychologist. This is what I've lived and breathed, just thinking about child trauma and really how systems are impacted by trauma, trauma-informed care, just kind of this framework. And I think many of us work in these similar kinds of systems. And over, particularly since, during this year, but I would say over the last several years, I have had this feeling that our lives and our work has become more reactive, more frenzied, more stressed, and we're kind of living in a world where there's kind of this expectation that we're always connected, and that when you look at things like social media or emails, it can be activating in ways that we don't fully understand, that our nervous system is kind of constantly on this response mode where the time to be able to check in with who we really are has slowly been chipped away from us. So I was actually thinking a lot about what it was like before we had these amazing smartphones and amazing social media and the amazing internet that does so much for us. But what that time was like, thinking about what did I do when I was bored instead of playing on my phone, scrolling through social media? What was that time? And I think it was more a profound time of quiet or engaging in different things. And so this is an interesting, I don't think our nervous systems are prepared for the amount of connectivity and information, and often distressing information that is fed to us by the algorithm. And so I was finding myself becoming just completely stressed, overwhelmed, and highly reactive. Every time I would see something on the news or read about it online, I would have a strong response and feel like I need to do something. And I would be frustrated. And I was finding that it was getting in the way of my ability to connect with some people that I love that might maybe disagree with me. And it was really stressing me out. And one of the things that's a practice I've done for years is I do a daily meditation. And I did that, and the idea of of protecting my peace became really important. And I had to really focus on that. And that's really where this work came from, is how do we actually protect our peace? And then it really transitioned in to the fact that peace is power. And that if as a collective, we are able to really connect to and understand our peace in times of moral distress, in turbulent times, how does that affect the way that we can show up and be aligned with our purpose? So that is where this work came from. I found for me, it was energizing and calming for me at the same time. So I hope that it maybe resonates with you as we walk through it today. So this can be difficult to think about, maybe some distressing things. We're not going to be talking about flowers and butterflies all day. We are going to be asking for a little bit of a reflection on things that are challenging. And so there's some agreements that I'm hoping we can all keep in mind as we engage in this work. One is be prepared to reflect. Have a pen and paper nearby for journaling or note taking. There's not an official participant guide. There doesn't need to be. It really is just a pen and paper. You could use your phone, but I would actually encourage you. There is something we know about handwriting, some of these responses that connect with us a little differently. So have that available to you. Participate in a way that feels right for you. So this is not, we don't have breakout sessions. I am going to ask for responses in the chat. You can do that or not do that. That is totally up to you. There's maybe some self-reflection activities that maybe you're like, I don't want to do that right now. I'm going to maybe save that for later. That's absolutely fine. So this is your training, it's your experience, and I really encourage you to participate in the way that's going to feel most energizing for you. You're all busy, you're all important. You took your time out to participate, so make sure that it fits your needs. Honor your personal boundaries. Everybody gets to decide what to share and not to share in the chat. Respect each other's limits without judgment or pressure. Practice confidentiality. What's shared in this space stays here. So if, let's say I say something or another participant that you happen to know put something in the chat that you're like, wow, I didn't know that about them, that's confidential. So we respect this shared space that we have together. We're also impacted differently. There's no right way to feel. I might be saying that I've had a lot of different sorts of emotional experiences, and you're thinking, I don't have that. That's fine. We all have different responses to the world and what's going on around us. Take space, not make space. This isn't necessarily a highly interactive in terms of speaking webinar, but really notice if you're kind of maybe over engaged or under engaged, whatever feels right for you. And it's okay to step away. We are going to have some pauses scheduled throughout so we can actually practice some of the skills that we're talking about here. But if you need to step away at a different time, please feel free to do that. Again, this is your time. So now we're going to begin by digging into our 5Gs. The first one is grounding. And grounding is this when some and imagine we're in this world where things are happening. We see something, hear something, and we realize we're having an emotional response. And what I would encourage everybody here to do is to understand that sometimes we might be having an emotional response and not necessarily know it. I I am kind of the I'm very guilty of this. Let's put it that way. That I find I'm 10 steps down a road of being reactive before I even realized it. So I really think that the importance of cultivating grounding strategies and techniques as a response, but also as part of our daily practice is critical. Like I said, that's where my meditation comes from. If I don't meditate in the morning, my day is 20% worse. There's just something about my ability to sit and be present and not get as reactive that does for me. So really cultivating these techniques on an ongoing basis can be incredibly helpful. And really in the times that we're living in right now, where there's so much what we call moral distress going on, it can be particularly important. So we've talked about moral distress. We've really, you might have heard the term before, but I wanted to define it for you so you know what we're talking about when in this context of our time together. So it really is this umbrella concept that describes our psychological, emotional, and physiological suffering that we may experience when we are basically have to act in ways that are inconsistent with our deeply held ethical values, principles, or moral commitments. In this idea of a tug of war, you see these very cute puppies playing tug of war. It's a tug of war between our beliefs and the actions that we have to take going forward. And I've done a lot of work with various agencies, particularly over the last year, where there's a lot of moral distress going on, whether it's from orders that are coming down, that there's activities that we need to engage in that maybe don't align with what we've been working on for a long time, that or with our personal values, and that struggle between how do we continue doing the work that we know is so important when we don't get to do it in the way that may feel the most aligned and purposeful for the folks that we serve, for our organizations, and for ourselves. So that tension is moral distress. And there's a lot of folks feeling that right now. So if that's you, I just wanted to validate that experience. And what causes, moral distress? I've already talked a little bit about it, but it can be these kind of systems level pressures. So the emotional toll of supporting others who are in distress, feeling complicit in systemic harm despite good intentions, or wondering about your own future and how this work will be valued by larger systems. So, some examples of this might be navigating misinformation and fear, enforcing scarcity and burnout culture that is rampant right now, holding space for your own experiences of, let's say, secondary traumatic stress. For those who are familiar, it's that idea that you have traumatic stress responses through hearing the stories of those around us or that we work with. Witnessing kind of politicized arguments on diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think is a really relevant example right now, and limited resources for high need sites. And we are going through times where there's been funding cuts, and already systems that felt like they weren't resourced enough are experiencing even more cuts and limitations. Now, how do you know if you are experiencing moral distress? You might have burnout and emotional exhaustion. There might be increased turnover. So whether it's in your organization, if you're a leader, folks might decide to move on, or they're calling out sick a lot. Decreased job satisfaction. We actually see one of the things that we're seeing is engagement surveys. So if your organization does employee engagement surveys, and as an organization, you had to make decisions in order to stay open and functioning that maybe weren't in alignment with what your staff hoped you would do, whether it's taking something off of a website or decreasing kind of the advertising or publicity of certain programs to not draw attention to them. These organizational decisions can feel frustrating for employees and for leaders who feel they do it because they want to continue staying open and surviving, right? So this kind of moral distress of there's no right answer, whether you're the leader or you're an employee, is very real right now. And also this sense of decreased quality of service or care. And that could be because certain resources or research isn't being shared, whatever that that might mean, that idea that what we understand about evidence not being translated or being translated or not being translated into practice in the way that's best for our clients and patients can also kind of really create and be signs of this moral distress. And as I was thinking about moral distress in this work, one of the things that occurred to me is that it creates all these feelings. So if you're having a moment right now where you're like, oh my God, I had to do this, I had to do this, I'm already having these feelings coming up. I want to validate that you're not alone. And I actually think that we are experiencing a profound um, grief, and that is showing up in our work, potentially in ways that maybe it hasn't before, or maybe more profoundly than it has before. So I'm going to talk a little bit about grief and how I really believe that what we're experiencing in many ways aligns with the grief cycle. So many of you, if not all of you, are likely familiar with the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She developed this kind of very well-known grief cycle. There's and it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and that this is not a you start at denial, you move through that, and then you go to anger, and then you go to bargaining. It really is one of these kind of interactive things where you might go from denial to depression, then back to anger, then back to denial. And so if you've ever experienced the loss of a loved one in your life, this is probably going to feel familiar to you. This kind of jumping around, where maybe one day you have one feeling, or one moment you have one feeling, and then the next you have another. And that is really what, her work was on death and dying. So it really is about this experience of losing someone important to you. But it could also be about loss in other ways in your life. What I would argue is that that same kind of model can be at work when we're experiencing moral distress at work. And so, for example, this idea of denial, right? Maybe we call it disorientation. So, classically, when we talk about what denial is, it is this idea that this isn't happening. I can't believe this. This person is still alive. I just haven't seen them. It's like our brain can't register, right? That's the classic version. When we're talking about disorientation in today's climate, it could look more like this can't be real. It's too much to process. Every day, something new, right? It's too much to process. Today's signs, what might this look like? Doom scrolling. I've definitely been somebody who's done that. Detachment, numbing, avoidance of, on the other hand, avoidance of news or community conversations. And then the invitation when we're having this experience is grounding, which is what we're going to get to in a moment. Normalize overwhelm as a survival response. It's okay to be overwhelmed right now. It actually means that you're grappling with this complexity of a time that we're not used to. And I'm just not talking about our socio-political climate, although that's certainly a part of it, just our general way of being in the world where we're constantly connected and the requirements keep feeling like they're more and more and more every day. Right? So this is normal. Normalize that this is a survival response. The next stage, according to Kubler-Ross, is anger. And it's this like, why is this happening to me? It can be why this person, when you're talking about loss, for example. But our modern adaptation is kind of this moral clarity. This is unjust. I'm furious at the system, the leaders, and the silence. And I think we see a lot of that, a lot of anger going on. And it really is as we're trying to navigate what we believe and what we stand for. So, what might it look like? Rage at political decisions, organizational injustice, helplessness turned outward. So, a lot of folks saying things, doing things, very outwardly angry. And, you know, we've had so many different events happen that really show that anger being at the center spotlight. So, the invitation I have for you, if this is an experience that you're having, is to look at your anger as a sign of care, and then to help channel it towards aligned action. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that actually might look like, or healthy release. So that can be storytelling, movement, or art, right? So there's so many different ways that we can channel that. So we're going to get there. And I will say I glance up at the chat. I don't always look at it because it can be a little distracting, but I'm seeing a lot of folks calling out yesterday's events, as well as really feeling that they're going through those same feelings of anger right now. So you're not alone. The next phase in Kubler-Ross's cycle is bargaining. So if I do this, things will go back to normal, right? If I just do this one thing, right, then things will go back to normal. But what might it look like now in this kind of modern adaptation in today's world? It's this over accommodation. Maybe if I say the right thing, post the right thing, help more, I can fix this. That's something I know I've been having that experience quite a bit lately. What might it look like? Trying to fix systemic issues alone. Sometimes it's toxic positivity, people pleasing to maintain relationships. So the invitation when we're going through this kind of over accommodation to try to survive is in looking at discernment. What's yours to carry and what's a collective responsibility? And we are going to go into how do you determine what's yours to carry? So you don't have to have that figured out just yet, but that is something we're going to spend some time on. The next phase in Kubler-Ross's cycle is depression. So I can't go on, I can't live this way. I kind of just want to go in a hole, whatever that might be. And in today's climate, instead, it might look like despair and moral exhaustion, right? And I feel like many of us have gone through these phases, right? This nothing I do matters. It's all too broken, right? The world is too broken. No matter what I do, it can't change anything. So the signs are numbness, withdrawal, cynicism, and hopelessness about change. So the invitation is offer community, remind people they're not alone. I would also say cultivate your own peace. You'll be shocked at how far that can get out in the world. Introduce tiny anchors of hope or connection, even if full belief isn't there yet. And Andrew, I see your comment. I've been bargaining for weeks and didn't realize it. Yep, I think you're not alone there, Andrew. And then in Kubler-Ross's model, the final stage is this acceptance, right? I'm at peace with what's happened. I'm not sure any of us are going to get at peace. So I would say maybe in the current context, it's active engagement with boundaries and purpose. It's actually having a sense of where you're aligned and where to go. So this is hard, and this is how I choose to show up. So the signs might be really working at what values aligned actions are, setting boundaries, accepting limitations, and recommitting to purpose. The hardest part is accepting those limitations. I'll tell you right now, because there's a fine line between accepting limitations and that helplessness and hopelessness. So the invitation is to frame acceptance as empowered realism, not giving up, but getting clear, right? I'm not asking you to accept things, but I'm asking you or inviting you to get some moral clarity on what's true for you going forward. Now, after Kubler-Ross's model, David Kessler actually added another stage to the stages of grief work, and that's finding meaning. So in today's climate, that might look like one that I love, reclaiming joy as resistance. Remember, the second we lose joy, the folks who are trying to keep us quiet win, right? So joy is resistance. Oh, thank you, Shane, for radical acceptance. Building mutual aid or community care networks. How can we support each other? Also, honoring our own ancestral or intergenerational resilience and taking small actions that align with our larger values. So now, what I invite you to do is to do a little bit of a reflection prompt on looking at where meaning lives for you. I have a couple questions here, but honestly, this really is just a moment for you to jot down a couple of things that you might be thinking about as I've walked through this kind of grief-informed framework for what you might be experiencing right now. So, what does peace or purpose look like through the lens of your community, your culture, or your ancestors? What practices or traditions help you feel rooted in something larger than yourself? How do you carry forward the wisdom of those who came before you? And what is one story of resilience that you've inherited? This isn't for the chat, this is for you. to jot on that piece of paper or that pad that's next to you that we talked about at the beginning, to just take a moment and really reflect on where resilience and peace and purpose come to you. So I'm going to be quiet and give you just about a minute. Um, can you clarify through resistance from the previous slide, please? Seems counterintuitive. Um, I'll come back to that in just a moment, Tracy. I don't want to, I do want to go back to that slide to make sure I understand your question, but I want to make sure folks have an opportunity to do this journaling. I'm going to go back. Um, so the question, clarify through resistance. I think for me, it comes down to what reclaiming joy is resistance. So I think the idea is that I think we might have this idea of resistance as being, I need to march on the streets. I need to do these big things out in the world in order to actually voice my resistance. But in talking with folks, it can be showing up for work in joy instead of anger. It can be finding joy in our daily lives versus being sad, depressed, angry all the time. I actually think that when we show up with kind of our true selves with joy, it actually kind of, how do I say, I'm trying to, my words matter here, but that so often when we're in socio-political climates that feel threatening, the first thing to go is hope and connection. And so I would say joy is resistance means that we do not give up hope, we do not give up connection, and that we actually fulfill that. Resistance is what tripping me. Yeah, and I think that's interesting because resistance is such a powerful word, but I also think it can mean things in peace. So now what I want to do is we're going to actually take a piece, what I call a peace pause. It's this 60 seconds. We talked about a lot, and I can tell this for folks that this is resonating and is might even be bringing up some emotional responses or reminding you of some emotional responses, and that is absolutely okay. This is a good space to be in that. But what we want to do when those responses come up is connect a little bit with our inner selves. So what we're going to do is I invite you, for whatever's comfortable for you, to take a moment. I like to, you're not on screen, so it's not, you don't have to take yourself off screen, but to maybe put your hand on your heart, another hand on your stomach, and close your eyes and just take some deep breaths. So this idea of just breathing in for 4 counts and breathing out for 4 counts. So I'll walk through one together, and then I'm going to invite you to do a couple of those breaths on your own. So breathe in for 4 counts. And breathe out for 4 counts. And do that a couple more times on your own. Okay, I invite you to come back. That was just a minute. But these breathing breaks, I see Janet talking about her breathing breaks because we don't realize we're stressed and we aren't taking the time to breathe. That is exactly right, Janet. So, what I ask you now is what shifted for you in that short pause, if anything? And feel free to type it in the chat. It's hard to feel joy when others are suffering. So, memories, peace, it relaxed me, relaxation, calm and awareness, reduced shallow breathing, more centered, calm. Calm at work for the first time in weeks. Body shifted to relaxed and aware. Finally put my shoulders down. You realize how often we are like this? Calm is amazing, peace. And for Katya, nothing, but it's a good reminder. Great. And so this really is a reminder that this is available to us. I've done this in meetings when I'm talking with other people. You don't need to go somewhere else and do this. It's something that you can actually cultivate when you're in the middle of a situation. I've done it in the car, in the shower, whatever it might be. This is just one little skill that you can use to help create that grounding when we're activated, when we're having a response to what might be going on around us. So now we're going to move on to the next G, which is guiding. And that really is tuning in to your internal compass and identifying your purpose. And I saw a thing in the chat. One of the comments was about, it's hard to reclaim joy when people are suffering. And you're absolutely right. And I think that's the challenge that we all are faced with. But what I invite you to is to really think about what your role is to help move forward, right? I believe firmly, especially folks who do the kind of work that y'all do, that is part of systems to support children and families, that's on the front lines with folks who are experiencing pain and suffering, right? That we are created for specific purposes. And often we get pulled into so many different directions to meet so many different needs that takes us out of alignment and away from what our unique gifts. And so part of what we're going to do today is walk through ways to reconnect with that. Now, I will say I'm going to walk through a couple of slides fairly quickly. Um, I invite you are going to have access to the whole slide deck after the training to actually walk through these steps in more detail, in more quiet, and more calm. We don't have time to do them in detail today, but you will have that for you to reflect on your own. So before we step into the purpose pieces, I just want you to know that right now. So I really think that as we look at being in alignment and figuring out what's uniquely ours, there's 5 steps that I think can really help us get there. One is and actually we're going to walk through these. Okay. The first one is notice or reflect on what feels most alive. So again, these are several questions. I invite you to explore them later when you have a little bit more time. Right now, I'm just going to go over them. So some questions to explore is, when do I feel most aligned with my values? What conversations do I feel energized in instead of depleted? Right? And that might surprise you. What kind of problem solving comes naturally to me? And what doesn't, but you often have to do anyway. I found that was the case. There's sometimes people who come to me, I'm like, I don't know the answer to this. That's not something that I was built for. Right? So what problem solving comes naturally to you? When in the last month did you feel proud of how you showed up? And what do people, this is one of my favorites, what do people consistently come to you for? And you get energy from it. So they might come to you for a lot of different things because that's your role. And sometimes you feel very depleted by the request or the ask. But what are the things that you feel you get energy from. That you're like, I love to jump in there. I love that somebody, when we did the What Made You Smile Today icebreaker at the very beginning, said, coming to work today. So clearly you get energy from that, the gentleman who posted that. So what gives you energy? It lights a little spark. And that's really the best way I can describe it. I've had it. Hopefully you've had it. The thing where you're like, oh, I get to do this. I get to be excited about this, right? So really tuning into what that is for you. Next, look at your zone of unique contribution. I'm going to say this now and I'm going to repeat it. There is a lot of pain and despair in the world. In fact, there's always been a lot of pain and despair in the world. Right now, it feels acute, but I could go back 30 years and there were things that were pain and despair back then as well. And we are not meant to solve everything. I have an aunt who I love so much, and she wants to solve every single problem. And what it means is she's constantly stressed and chaotic and isn't doing anything. We each have these unique zones of contribution that we can give to. You do not have to solve everything. There are things that you can uniquely contribute to. And this was something that took a lot for me. I There's a lot of stuff going on that I don't know enough about, but there are things I know a lot about that I can help with. And that's where I should put my energy, right? And I'd say the same for you. So, what am I especially skilled at? Not just technically, but relationally? What part of the mission or work resonates most with me personally? What lived experiences shape my insight or empathy? And what do I understand on a soul level that others might not? And you may never have asked yourself this question. I know I had not asked myself this question until recently. So, really thinking about what is your zone of unique contribution? Step 3, locate your purpose and community. So, during challenging political times, sometimes it feels like our actions can be performative or public, but sometimes our most powerful purpose lives behind the scenes in relationships. You don't have to be the loudest in the room to lead with purpose. You don't have to have a formal title to change culture. And you don't have to have all the answers to make a meaningful impact. Okay? So, thinking about that, some questions for you to consider is, who are you in relationship with? Who are you connected with? What are you co-creating? What are you involved in? And how does your work ripple outward? And I promise you that it does, no matter how big or small you perceive it to be, right? There's people who are very public, who are out there, and then there's people who are really quiet and you'd be shocked. It's the kind of It's a Wonderful Life thing, how one small person's experiences ripples and changes so many others. So remember that when you're thinking about what you can give and do in the world, that often it's these small ripples that can create such bigger change, more than you might imagine. Step 4, differentiate between pressure and purpose. I will tell you, this was a big one for me. Before saying yes to a new task or responsibility, and I recognize you have jobs, you have job descriptions, so do what's within your job description and your role. That's important. But thinking about those above and beyonds, those things that maybe you say yes to because you feel you should or you have to. Does this align with my zone of unique contribution? So this thing that I'm being asked to do, is it actually aligned with what I'm uniquely suited for? Will this energize or deplete me? There are so many things I've done over the years that were above and beyond that just depleted me because I had some vision that I had to do them to be valuable, important enough, right? What are you doing to feel like you are valuable, important, and enough that is above and beyond, but actually makes you feel like going home and just hiding in a hole, right? So connect with those things. And is this the work I'm uniquely called to do? Or am I stepping in from habit or fear? Right? So often, again, this idea that we're trying to meet other people's expectations of us. And what I found for me is so often those expectations, I'll just be honest, I had expectations from my father. When I asked him, they weren't his expectations, they're what I assumed. So often we have these visions or ideas of what other people are expecting of us that aren't actually accurate or have changed over time. But there's a version of ourselves that's still trying to meet them. So, what are you doing because you think you should? And if you're being asked to do something, are you doing it because you should or because it truly aligns with your purpose? So, asking yourself, is it pressure or purpose? Recommit regularly. Your purpose evolves. So instead of resisting that change, we check in with our purpose regularly. So things that I did 10 years ago that brought me a lot of energy may not do that anymore. 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Has that changed for you as well? Where is my energy being called? What old identities or habits am I ready to release? And I'll say burnout, when you're in burnout, that can distort your sense of purpose. You can think there can be should all the time. And your identity shifts. So things like caregiving, illness, parenthood can reshape how you go forward. And that's okay. And political or systemic upheaval may demand that you recalibrate. I remember once we hired somebody for a position and she was amazing. But you could tell in talking to her. So it was a position that was not in the community. It was a training and TA position. And you can tell in speaking with her that she really liked being in the community. And this was right when things kind of erupted and Russia attacked Ukraine. And she actually found a job going to be on the front lines in Ukraine. And that's what changed for her. This was a shift. She just decided, I need to go there and do something. And that was her aligned action. And she never looked back. And it was a great change for her. So really, really connecting with that. And what new stories am I ready to live? Now, that was a lot. So again, you can go back and go through that in your own time. But for the next couple of minutes, what I want you to do is to reflect on, when did you feel most alive at work in the last month? What were you doing and with whom? So don't type it in the chat yet. What I want you to do is to journal for a couple of minutes on your own. And you can add in anything. I won't go back to the slides because I want to keep these up. But if there's anything I mentioned or talked about or brought up an idea for you, jot those down too. And just spend a couple minutes reflecting on purpose and energy and what makes you feel most alive. And then in a moment, I'll invite you to share it in the chat, but don't yet. I want you to have this quiet reflection before you put it out into the world. So we'll just take a couple minutes here. And it goes without saying, but feel free to stand up, stretch, take a grounding break if that calls to you right now as well. Okay. So this again is just an introduction. Hopefully on your own, you can do some more reflecting. But if it calls to you, if there's something that you felt most alive doing at work that you want to type in the chat, feel free to do that. Again, it's not a requirement. It could be just for you right now if you're still kind of thinking about it. But if it is, calling to you share it. So Riley, I was working with a client and they confided in me their trauma, allowed them to feel for the first time. And we used coping skills. Oh, kids' energy in the morning. Ah, the all staff meeting in La Jolla. That's something that Chadwick does every year. That's great. Teaching my, let's see, now they're starting to come in, teaching my class and knowing all the students were engaged. Brainstorming ideas to further our company and creating new business ideas and sparking inspo in each other. So this was, so I appreciate, Shelley, your vulnerability. There's a struggle to think of anything. Lately, I haven't felt alive or happy at work. All I could think of was trainings, collaborations, and helping with events. So, Shelley, that's an invitation for you to think about maybe step away from your work lens, and ask yourself the same question. What makes you feel most alive? And if it's that training collaboration, tuning a little bit more into that. Clem, I couldn't think of one. So, same with Shelley. Maybe step outside of the work lens and ask yourself the same question. Um, when I was helping a client navigate his plans, reviewing case processing techniques, observing a training, new ideas, achieving a new role, helping families. See, now they're coming in pretty quick, so I probably can't read all of them, but other folks having a hard time, and that's information. This isn't, we're going to go into self-compassion, but just take it as information. It's not something that's a should or something you need to worry about. It's just an observation right now. Okay, not give up joy and peace, set a boundary, connectedness, working one-on-one with my senior population. Oh gosh, so many. Soft skills, mentoring, helping a client get housing. Oh my gosh, so many good ones here. This is great. Um, Wonderful. So if you had a hard time thinking of it, keep reflecting, and maybe it's not at work and maybe that's information for you. So now we're going to take a moment and go on to our next G, which is guarding. There we go. Creating boundaries. So before we get into boundaries, I want to introduce the zones of control framework. And some of you might have already been exposed to this. But this is a tool that, as we dive into the boundaries conversation, helps us make sense of our boundaries in a little bit of a unique way. And I first learned about this tool from Patricia Fisher, who is from Tend, which is a great organization if you're not familiar with it. And they do a lot of training on secondary traumatic stress. And the idea with the zones of control framework is that it really helps us identify things that we can control, things we can influence, and what we need to accept and release. And I think that this is helpful because one of the things we do when we are doom scrolling, when we're overwhelmed, when we're stressed out, when we're hearing all these things happening in the news, is we focus on all these things that we don't have control over, that no matter, that is not something that's within our purview. And I was doing this. There were things going on that I'm like, if I could just stop this war here. And that's not something I necessarily have in my control, right? So this is really, but I'm spending a lot of emotional energy on it, right? So let's sort through these. So it's really about what is yours to carry. Now, zones of control are the areas you have direct power over. Think of these as your anchor in the storm. It might be how you hold space in team meetings or how you show up in team meetings. It might be how you communicate with others, including things like important information and updates. It might be how you regulate your nervous system, how you do a 60-second calm reset, how you might, what you choose to model, how you choose to show up. That might be it. or you might have a role where you have control over maybe teams or cultures in different ways, right? Whatever your role is, it's thinking about what you have direct control over. You do not need anybody's permission. It's something that's right there available to you. Okay. So just thinking about that. And I will say, often it's important to spend most of our time in our areas of control and our areas of influence. So that really is the second one, zone of influence. That's areas you can provide input. This is where advocacy lives. So these are basically, you can talk to other folks who have control to create change, but you can't alone create that change on your own. So maybe it's partnering with others for policy shifts. Maybe it's writing letters and offering testimony for larger groups. Maybe it's sharing impact stories that highlight the human cost of certain actions or inactions, right? So this is where we get to inform and educate. And we have 172, I think, advocates on this with us today, right? So this is so much of what we do every day, all the time. Now, the final is the zone of acceptance. These are areas you cannot change. And honestly, this is the zone of grief. These might be laws or executive orders that come down that today I can do nothing about it. This might be institutional decisions that are made far above your pay grade. It might be your organization merging with another organization and creating all these changes. It might be cultural changes or resistance that you can't change overnight. So it's not something you can do or influence right now. And this is particularly frustrating, but is also where when you're distressed, you spend 80% of your brain power. I know I do. And I've talked to many people that have the same experience, that we really focus all this time being angry and frustrated and sad about things that we can't control. And that's okay. That's where we have grief. And that's where you move through the phases of grief, right? That's why I introduced the grief framework. Be angry, be sad, be, overwhelmed. And eventually there's a time where it needs something that needs to be accepted and moved into advocacy, right? And I think there'll be some folks who are a little frustrated hearing this. Please don't hear that I am dismissing all the pain and suffering in the world. But what I'm talking about is our ability as unique individuals to best contribute. Because what often happens, if you're like my aunt, for example, and you spend all this time being angry and sad, you don't have anything left to actually give to create the change that you're looking for. So I invite you to grieve the things that are outside your control and influence to better align you with the things that are. So what I'm going to offer for you to do right now, I'm sure there's a lot of feelings going on, is to take a couple minutes, again, to quietly reflect on what's one action in my zone of control right now, what's something within my zone of influence, and what is something that I'm spending some emotion, an amount of emotional energy focusing on, but is actually in my zone of acceptance. I am not going to ask you to put these in chat. Please don't. This is for you to reflect on your own. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to reflect on these, and then we'll come back together. Okay. So next time you feel overwhelmed, we'll come back together. I invite you to pause and ask yourself, in this situation, what is mine to carry? What is within my control? And sometimes it's just how I respond or show up, or how I choose to ground and take care of myself. What is yours to influence? Is there someone you can talk to, inform, share, connect with about it? And what do I need to release with intention, grief, and grace? Now, once we've been able to identify our purpose and clarify what's ours to carry, that's where boundaries come in. We've got to have boundaries to protect us. Boundaries are connected to burnout. Lack of boundaries are connected to burnout. Boundaries protect the purpose that we have spent our time cultivating and aligning so that you can stay energized and well. They help you protect that peace so that peace, as I'm saying in this, can become power. So we have a short poll here. Which boundary is hardest for you right now? Some options we have are time, role, emotional, digital, so hardest, or other. And you can feel free to type in, if you're comfortable, you don't have to, but if there's something else that you want to share that's another kind of boundary, you can type it in the chat. Just looking as folks complete. Hopefully you had that poll that showed up for you. And I know a lot of these are hard. And you might be like, well, some days it's this one and some days it's this one. So just thinking about which one would have the hardest. And I'm seeing some folks type emotional in the chat there. And as I'm looking at, let's see, we still have responses coming in to the poll. Let's see. Okay, so about 2/3 of you who've responded so far. So by far, almost half of you are saying emotional. About 20%, hopefully you can see that, are saying time. 17% saying role. 12% saying digital, and other, about 5% saying other. So there's a lot of emotional and time there. Okay, great. Now, without boundaries, we can experience, so boundaries is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I think that there's more nuance and challenges associated with boundaries than we often give it credit for. So just know that before we get into this conversation. Without boundaries, we can often experience emotional exhaustion, resentment, right? That's a big one that came up for me when I kept ignoring my boundaries. I'd become resentful, feeling used up by the end of the day, having a hard time saying no, even when you're exhausted and over capacity, because it can often feel like we're not showing up the way that we need to. And that emotional stuff, right? For many of you, emotional. So saying no, what does that mean for my relationships? What will happen if I say no? But if we don't have our boundaries, then it might be very easy to disconnect from our purpose and our values. We just keep doing, right? But with boundaries, we gain greater clarity about what's ours to carry, right? We get increased connection. So this one is really interesting to me. So I've seen boundaries get kind of handed down in so many different ways. And I think you might know what I'm talking about. There are some people who are really good with boundaries and they're able to create boundaries in this really warm, connecting way. And then there are other people who create boundaries that actually disconnect them from the world. And I would say healthy boundaries are actually a way to facilitate connection with others. And what I mean by this is that when we are saying yes, 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 and we're burning out and we're exhausted, we're not showing up as our true selves. And when we're not showing up, we're not actually connecting to people. We're just doing what we think we need to do in order to meet these needs in the world that we're perceiving. But when we set our boundaries, we're actually protecting our peace and our sense of self so that we can more formally show up. So that so if I, for example, I'm somebody who has had a hard time with boundaries, this one resonates a little too close to home for me, if I'm to be honest. And what happens is that I say yes, 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 and then I get resentful, angry, and I don't want to even talk to the person who that might be asking the next thing, right? That's not connection. That's actually disconnection. But if I am able to say, you know what, I need to block out this time, I need to say no to this thing, that enables me to better show up when I am uniquely qualified to showing up. So so it's this idea of space versus spaciousness. When we say no just to say no, because we're locked away from others, that's space, but it doesn't actually create this like spaciousness for us to actively engage with each other. And when we have boundaries, we also get more consistent emotional regulation. We get increased energy and ability to show up, stronger alignment with our values, and protection from this compassion fatigue or this idea of kind of caring, caring, caring that can wear on us. So, some myths and truths about boundaries. Setting boundaries is selfish. It's really not. Boundaries honor both your needs and others' needs by creating clear expectations and healthier relationships, right? When you're around somebody who has good, spacious boundaries, they feel safer, more comfortable, and easier to be with because you know you're not trudging over, you're not violating something, that they'll tell you what they mean, and and you can trust that what they're telling you is accurate for them. If I set boundaries, people will be upset with me. Oh, this was a big one for me. Oh my gosh, I can't say no, right? This person will be unhappy if I say no. The reality is healthy boundaries can tolerate and even grow from healthy relationships can tolerate and even grow from clear boundaries. Discomfort is normal, but not a sign is discomfort is normal, but not a sign when you're doing something wrong. Good leaders are always available to their teams. For those leaders out there, feeling like you have to be always available. So good leaders model a sustainable work by setting limits on their own availability. This encourages others to do the same. Once I set a boundary, it will always hold. Oh, this is a good one. I'll tell you once, and you're going to listen, and it's never going to be a conversation again. This is the tricky and hard part about boundaries is once you set them, you have to maintain them. They're about discernment, deciding what to say yes to and where to say no, and that they're an ongoing process. Boundaries push people away. Those with strong boundaries are more resilient, effective, and better able to support teams long term. So whether you're a leader, whether you're a team member, this really enables you to better support people, show up tomorrow instead of just showing up for today. Okay. So boundaries, they can sound like many different things. Let's see here, there we go. And these are just really mild examples. I absolutely encourage you to dig a little bit more into boundaries work. Um, so it might sound like I can't take that on. Here's what I can do by Friday. Yeah, there's a great CalTrin training on boundaries next week. So thank you, Haley, for putting that in there. Um, Given my capacity, I can offer A or B. What helps more? That's outside my role. Who's the right owner? I'll need X to do that well. I'm pausing to regulate. That'd be fun if that could be part of the culture, that I need a moment to regulate and then I can show up even more. I'll reply at 3. All right, so there's a lot of different ways to share your boundaries. So now, thinking about this conversation, what is one small boundary you could set this week to protect your peace? Again, I invite you to journal that next to you. And then if you'd like, you can type it in the chat, but that is absolutely dependent on your level of comfort. Hmm. Joanna, Jonna, my time for me. Raul, leaving work on time. So time's a big one. And leaving work on time. Oh, time's a big one. Not answering messages outside of work hours. Turning off my work phone after clocking out. Pausing to regulate before responding. Accepting that it won't all get done today. Peace pause, which we're going to do in a moment. Handling what I'm able to. Taking lunch on time. I'm a manager with a bit more privilege, but I've stopped explaining my boundaries. I just say, thanks so much. I'll get back to you at 3. That's great. Taking my break. Absolutely. So these are all really easy, accessible boundaries, prioritizing myself, right? So continue thinking about what boundaries you can put in place to help create that connection and spaciousness. Let's see. What we experience with good boundaries. Let's see. I'll just go back for just a moment and then we'll really this clarity, but you'll also get a copy of the slides so you have access to them as well. But really they help us show up. I'd say that's the best way to really distill down what boundaries give us, is the ability to be contained and to show up. Okay, so now let's take a moment for another peace pause. So we've just talked about a lot. So I want you to check in with yourself. And this is not for the chat. This is just for you. Just take a moment. What's coming up for you? What feels resonant or new? You can write it down or you can sit with it. Just to take that moment just to connect and ground. Okay. So now we're going to move into the next G, which is one of the fun ones. They're all fun, I think, but self-care and renewal. So this is where that self-care comes in, that often is kind of the only thing we talk about when we're talking about how to handle moral distress. So for me, it really comes a little later, after we've set the groundwork by grieving, aligning our purpose, setting our boundaries. Now we can move into really taking care of ourselves. So growing kindness fuels stamina. So I've been really loving the work of Kristen Neff, but many of you are familiar. I've joined her self-compassion community. If you haven't, it's a great resource. And she's done, if you haven't heard of her, she's a researcher out of the University of Texas at Austin. She has some TED Talks and some books and some, a community. And really, she's done some great research on self-compassion. And she differentiates self-compassion from self-esteem and really talks about that it has kind of three key elements. The first is self-kindness versus self-judgment. So many of us, and myself included, have gone through our lives thinking that kind of with this negative voice that says, you got to be smarter, better. How come you did this? I can't believe you let this happen, right? Thinking that the negative voice would serve as fuel for me to feel better, right? For me to be able to make a change. Thank you, Shane. I have that book at the end as well. Set Boundaries is a great, great book. That's a resource that I highly recommend too. Now, what Kristen Neff says is that when we engage in that self-judgment, what we're actually doing is we're getting our nervous system activated. So we're doing the opposite of grounding. So when we start to say, like I might say to myself, oh, Lisa, why did you think you could do this? Why did you think this could happen? That's not going to work at all. Do you know how that feels inside? I feel sick. I feel shame. I feel gross when I say that to myself. But for years, I thought that was the best way to motivate me to do better. But you know what it did? It made me want to go hide and do nothing and feel horrible and stay in a circle of being dysregulated. So, what Kristen Neff would say is that instead, engage in self kindness, the way you would talk to your trusted friend or how you might treat your pet. I've got 3 cats. There's never a world in which I say anything negative to any of my cats. All they get is how, even when they're in trouble, how loved and cared for they are. And my best friends, it's the same way, right? And folks who know me, hopefully that, for those out there, hopefully that's your experience of me as well. I would never say the things I say to myself, to the people I care about out there. And so she would say responding to struggles with warmth and understanding instead of criticism actually helps calm us. It's another grounding technique. So, an example, this is hard and I'm doing my best, right? And this is actually a great use for ChatGPT, by the way. So you can actually type in, I'm struggling with X, give me 5 self-compassionate responses I can say to myself today. And find one and put it on a sticky note on your computer. That's a great way to just calm your nervous system. Her second kind of element of self-compassion is common humanity versus isolation. So we recognize that suffering and imperfection is part of being human. So this idea that I or others might have that it's easier for others out there, that it's not, this thing isn't hard for them, that I'm the only one who has this feeling is just simply untrue. That we all share this common humanity where life is hard. And absolutely, we're all on the same ocean in different boats. So for some folks, this time in life might be tremendously harder, or this experience of life might be tremendously harder, right? But we're not alone. That suffering is something we all experience. And so just saying, I'm not alone in this, others struggle too, can help calm us. And finally, mindfulness versus over identification. So, engaging specifically in mindfulness opportunities, noticing painful thoughts and emotions without being consumed by them, right? Example, this is a moment of stress. I can acknowledge it without letting it define me. Having the ability to separate yourself from that experience, right? This is a moment in time. And what's interesting to me is I've so many times had that where it feels like it's taking over everything. And then later I can't even remember what it was about. And I'm guessing I'm not the only one, right? So we take on these moments as though they're a part of our core being when they're just an experience, right? It's a thought, it's a feeling. We absolutely validate it, we honor it, but we aren't consumed by it. We don't let it define us. So, one of the best ways to really engage in self compassion work is through a loving kindness meditation. Now, some of you may have done this before, but I'm going to lead you through this um, as a way to just embody what we've been talking about, what loving kindness actually can look like. So, really the idea, so a loving kindness meditation is a way to offer care to ourselves, first to ourselves, then outward to others. It's also known as metta, that's METTA. It's very Buddhist practice that has been understood and studied through several different Eastern and Western lenses. And the idea is that we help folks calm our self criticism, cultivate compassion for others, and reconnect to peace. So, we're going to take a moment. What I invite you to do, and this is all an invitation, is to sit in whatever way might feel comfortable for you. It can be nice to kind of put your both feet on the ground if they're not already. Put your arms kind of on your lap potentially, and just feel connected to your chair, feel connected to the ground below you. If you want, you could also lie down. That's another way to do it. As we go through this, you could either close your eyes or you can have a soft gaze, whichever feels safer for you. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Just notice what arises and offer gentleness to yourself. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple deep breaths. So take a deep breath in and a long exhale out. And in that, let your body settle, supported by the ground beneath you. Pay attention to your shoulders, your hands, your chest, your jaw. Unclench your jaw, maybe soften your belly. Take another deep breath in and out. Now I want you to bring to mind yourself, perhaps imagining your own face or just simply sensing your presence. Silently repeat these phrases or adapt them in a way that feels right for you. To do it with the hand on my heart. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. Spend time with each phrase, breathing in the wish and breathing out compassion. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. Now we're going to extend this out or circle out to others. So I want you to think of somebody you love, somebody you care for deeply. This could be a trusted friend, your partner, a family member, a pet. And I want you to picture them and on the repeat to yourself, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be peaceful. and may you live with ease. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be peaceful. And may you live with ease. I don't know about you, but I get emotional when I think about that. Now I want you to bring to mind someone you see often but don't know very well. Maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a barista at your favorite coffee shop, maybe it's a coworker you pass in the hall but you don't really know. Let's offer them the same wishes. Get that person in mind. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be peaceful. May you live with ease. Deep breath. The next one is optional. This might be a little harder to do, so I invite you if it calls to you. If not, you can picture someone you love or a neutral person. But the next one is bringing to mind somebody who might be difficult for you. Somebody who maybe it's a coworker you've had struggles with, someone you have some anger towards, a family member. Only if it feels safe. This is somebody you might find challenging without excusing their behavior. Simply acknowledge their humanity and offer, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be peaceful. And may you live at ease. Deep breath. Hand on heart. That one could be a little challenging. Now I want you to imagine that your compassion is this big ball of light around you. Be whatever color is calling to you. And I want you to imagine it expanding outward out of your home or your office, into your neighborhood, into your city, to your state, your country. And eventually your compassion is covering the whole world. Everybody, everywhere, all beings. And then say, may all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be peaceful. And may all beings live with ease. Take a final deep breath in and out. And notice how it feels to have spent these moments offering kindness to yourself and to others. Carry this intention with you as you return to the rest of your day. And I see Casey's comment about it being easier to do it for others than herself. You're not alone there, Casey. I'm sure there's plenty of others who have the same experience. Yeah. So this is something, it takes, if you really engage in it, it can take 10 or 15 minutes. There's free versions everywhere. You can just look it up if you want it to be facilitated for you. Insight Timer has them. You can Google loving kindness. And really, this is a great way to really cultivate this compassion for yourself as well as compassion for others. So for me, that's foundational to this kind of self-care piece. But there's other things that we can do, right? We can limit our exposure to negativity and to digital. One of the best things that I've done recently is I actually moved my phone out of my bedroom at night. So I used to scroll before I went to sleep and scroll when I woke up in the morning. And I would get activated kind of before my brain could actually make sense of it. So I got an alarm clock because I know everybody, your phone is your alarm. Mine's the same way. I spent 20 bucks and I got a great, it's in white noise machine alarm clock. And I use that and I move my phone into the other room and I sleep better without a doubt. It's not there just for me to grab. So ways that we can really limit our exposure to negativity. You can also set up your phone to kind of minimize social media, kind of give a daily time on it. So there's ways to kind of limit some of these external things that I think we're also used to being activated all the time. Create mental space. A lot of you talked about the boundary that you could put in place is prioritizing yourself. So saying no, spending time alone, scheduling that time away from external pressures so you can recharge, whether it's a few minutes or whether it's an entire afternoon, carving out that time. You can also do other kinds of relaxation techniques. I've been really exploring different relaxation techniques lately. Uh, so progressive muscle relaxation is one. So systematically tensing and releasing muscle groups. Oh, Laura, I just saw your comment. You don't have social media and you're happier. Oh my gosh, good for you. That's amazing. Uh, I wish I maybe someday I'll get there. You're my hero. Um, helps. So really this muscle relaxation helps reduce physical tension and promote relaxation. Visualization. So you might have noticed I try to fill the presentation with a lot of beautiful pictures because that beauty helps calm my nervous system as I'm doing this. I love presenting, but it's also something that gets me going. So even looking at this picture, you'll see sunsets, a lot of sunsets. I love them. And so things, visualizing pretty pictures, things that bring you joy can help calm. Aromatherapy is another one. I got this kind of Sage, if the folks know Sage Wellness, they have like great aromatherapy things. I love to get lavender and kind of nice smells. My diffuser is amazing. Um, Other things, reaching out to others, talking with friends, joining support communities, social connection with real life people, volunteering, focusing on your personal growth, like reading, taking courses. I'm kind of an obsessive reader. I'm always have 3 books going at the same time. These things can offer distraction, but also build your confidence and kind of create good spaces to engage your brain, sense of progress during difficult times. Nature, going for walks. There's so much that going for walks does for us. That kind of that movement. There's a whole bunch of stuff about how we kind of hold the stress in our body, and so movement can actually help release it. Walking will do that. Folks who know me know I have my Peloton that I'm kind of obsessed with, and I ride that when I have a lot of emotional stuff going on. And it's a great way to kind of let it out because if it's not, otherwise it'll kind of stay locked inside. Gardening for some folks, that's a great way to really uh, connect with the earth. There's something about the smell of the dirt and the feeling on your hands. Humor and play. Um, so laughter is a great effective emotional regulator. Watching a funny show. True story, whenever I have a really bad day, I watch Anchorman. For those who know what that movie is, it's one of my favorites. I'm a San Diego native, so I have a lot of fun with all the San Diego jokes, and it's goofy, and I don't understand why I love it, but I will laugh till I cry every time I watch it, and that's an amazing thing. Play and creativity, and I do see hands are going up. If you have a question, put it in the Q&A. We're not necessarily going to answer hand raised questions right now, but we will get to questions at the end. Play and creativity, moments of joy, goofing around. I know for me, play is a little rougher. And so really, these are just things to help us take care of ourselves on a daily basis, right? Things to help calm us, but also find the joy. Because if things are constantly heavy and hard, then we don't have the energy to engage the way that we need to. So now I have one more reflection prompt or another reflection prompt. We're going to just take a moment or two. Think of a recent moment when you were hard on yourself. Okay. What would it have sounded like to respond with self-kindness? So just journal that. You don't need to put it in the chat. Just thinking of that moment. And maybe, you could even go into ChatGPT and type in and get some answers on what a self-compassionate response might have been instead of the one that you had. And Tracy, I see your question. The sequence is, yes, safe, healthy. Oh, you found it. Good. Okay. What would it have been like to respond with self-kindness instead? Whatever you might have been hard with yourself on. Okay. So now we're going to move to the final G, which is giving. So we've done a lot to kind of look at ourselves, create that peace, protect that peace, embody that power. Now it's about what it looks like going outward. So we know this kind of distress is not just an individual problem, that organizations have a moral and practical responsibility to create conditions where people can thrive. And it doesn't mean that you do everything your team wants or that organizations make sure everybody's happy all the time. But it does mean that there's opportunities as we are engaging in the world, whether we're an organization or part of a community. These are all things that we can do to bring this peace outward. One is to normalize and name what is happening, our experiences. So acknowledge things openly instead of pathologizing staff or friends' reactions. I just want every time you get frustrated that this person said this or did this, remember grief, right? Grief creates anger, grief creates depression, grief creates these kind of nonsensical thinking about what might be happening. And just acknowledge that it can be confusing. And when we're grieving, that things don't always make perfect logical sense for others and for ourselves. And from an organizational response, leaders recognizing moral distress as something that's just part of what we're doing, especially right now in our current times. And that there's maybe forums where staff can share pressures, or there can be a community where you can come with your colleagues and share some of those pressures without fear or stigma. The next is aligning values with action. So looking, and I recognize that this is really hard. And as somebody who's often represented the organizational response during difficult times, if you're not a leader and you get frustrated when your organization makes certain decisions, know that usually they're thinking about what can keep us going so we're around 5 years from now versus having to close tomorrow. I know that's what I had to think about all the time is I know how many people aren't happy, but if we do this, we're going to have a target on our back and they might shut us down tomorrow. So there's always this, how do we keep an eye on what will be the greatest good for the greatest amount of time, ver- but can feel really gross in the moment when the organization has to engage in making decisions that don't fully align. So you, as either a leader or a team member, get to decide how you show up within that environment and what works for you, knowing there might be things you can't control. So I wanted to make sure we have that frame in mind as we're talking about aligning values with actions, that there might be things that you have to do, but there's also opportunities for control and influence. So looking at policies and practices and alignment with organizational values. When values and actions don't match, name the gap and communicate steps towards alignment as much as possible, and celebrate those moments when individuals or teams act in ways that protect peace and integrity. So one example of this I want to give is that I did a similar version of this work for an organization and who was federally funded and was given a directive that they needed to shut down part of their website. And this was something staff members had worked on for 5 years, put so much work into, and they had to shut it down overnight. And it created so much distress, as you might imagine, and you might have experienced something similar. And they absolutely went through all the feelings of grief that we're talking about, but decided that they could use their activism in different ways. So this was particularly related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Maybe they couldn't have that part of their website, which is a sad, unfortunate thing and was frustrating for many. But when they created training videos, you better believe they made sure there was a lot of diversity represented. You better believe that they used the language the best that they could to put the word out there, that they didn't just give up, but they thought of creative ways to do activism. And so there might be ways to align your values with actions that you're not necessarily familiar with because you have like one idea of what it needs to look like. And that's really that nervous system saying it's this or that. That's it. When we calm down, we're actually able to be more creative and innovative and come up with maybe more creative ways to meet those needs during these challenging times. And then I would say creating that collective resilience. So generally, especially if you're the leader of an organization or a leader within an organization, looking at workloads and staffing to be what's really reasonable and mitigating burnout culture, doing grounding and reflection in team meetings, doing that 60-second grounding in the beginning of team meetings. I always thought maybe that's something I should start doing. And offer access to ongoing training, coaching, or peer support to help really build that coping capacity. And this really does create that ripple effect. So when organizations normalize distress, staff feel seen and less isolated. Maybe they can't fix it, but they can at least validate experience. And when those values align with action, our trust increases. And when resilience is collective, that means it's a value, it's something that we engage in together. People stay longer, burnout decreases, and the quality of the services that we provide, because everybody on here in some way, shape, or form supports children and families, whether it's directly or indirectly, and your quality of services improve. Now, this is our final call to action reflection today. What I want you to do is think about your own team, whether you're a leader, team member, whatever your role is. Which of these commitments feels most urgent right now? And this is for you to journal. You don't need to type it in the chat until you've journaled it. I want you to journal it first, not the chat instead. So which feels most urgent? Normalizing distress, aligning values with action, or building resilience practices? And what's one small shift your organization could make to better protect peace for you and your colleagues? So again, self-reflect. And then once you do that, I invite you to type a word or two in the chat if it calls to you. Certainly not necessary, but just an invitation. So we'll just take a moment or two for that. Okay, I see Riley typed in normalize distress, have mindfulness technique 1 time a week during our meeting. That's great. Building resilience, align values with action. We had a Zen room that was great, but then they took it away. Yeah, space is always a thing. I'd love to see it back. Well, and Shelley, what's within your zone of control and what's within your zone of influence there? Be transparent about my boundaries, give others permission to do the same, make time for us with techniques we learned. Great. Incorporate short breathing practices into training. Normalize distress, have debriefing and mindfulness techniques after heavy cases as a regular practice. Building resilience, aligning values with action, respond with authenticity rather than political correctness. Oh, I feel you there. Is it Damana? Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts there? Build resilience. Take a few minutes and say to yourself, your staff, and your clients, yeah, may you be happy. Oh, I love it. I know I was on a call where they ran a loving kindness before they gave us some really tough information. And I tell you, it just changed. It was great. It really did change how we were able to receive and engage in the conversation. Thank you. That's great, Gerald. So as a closing message, you are needed, not for everything, but for something specific. You matter, and what you're doing matters. So one thing you might be taking with you, feel free to jot them in the chat as I go through the rest of, I have a couple resource slides. Write down a value, boundary, or practice that you're committed to holding. We've already seen some of those in the chat, so you don't have to do it again if you already did it. But just something that you want to take with you. Here's some resources. Again, you're going to get these slides. That Set Boundaries, Find Pieces right there, as well as Self-Compassion, Burnout. These are great books. I highly recommend. So a little bit about me. I wanted to share some upcoming, if this felt important and vital to you, I have some things that I'm launching through my work that I'm super excited about. One is this Peace is Power community. I'm just starting it, so I have this kind of founders. If you want to join, it's free for 3 months, and there'll always be a free tier, and then there'll be kind of a paid tier after that. But if you want to join for a couple months, meet other folks, engage in weekly practices, a monthly peace circle call, a community. It also gives you access to training discounts, which I'll talk about. So again, it's free till December 31st. There's the link here. You'll also have a QR code to access all my resources on the next slide. So more information, but definitely if you want to be part of a community and keep the conversation going. If this training was just intro and you're like, I want more, I'm starting a 3-part deep dive training. And if you're a member of the community, you get a deep discount on it. And so it's interactive. 3 parts starting September 23rd, so you can see that. I also have a weekly blog for free on my website where I talk about some of these things. So if you want that, you can join my email list, get it delivered. And then there's things like the Calm Calendar. I have a boundary self-assessment, some trauma-informed stuff. So just lots of stuff. If you want more training, feel free to reach out. This is my contact information. And you'll have these slides. Now, This is my favorite. I saw this card when I was out shopping. After the plague came the Renaissance. Period between the peak of the Black Plague pandemic in Europe and the beginning of the Renaissance is about 50. There's actually an overlap. The Black Death devastated Europe, killed significant portion of the population, was clearly an awful, awful thing. But its aftermath contributed to societal shifts that led to the Renaissance, a period of renewed interest in classical art, literature, and culture. And I have this card on my desk. I look at it every day. And whenever things feel particularly rough, I remember this. And so how we can show up, I think, is so important and significant for this work. So thank you for being here. And I will pass it back to our CalTrin folks
Yeah.
for last thoughts.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Every training that I've been in with you is just absolutely amazing. And I love getting to do these trainings because I learn a lot as well. So I'm learning along all of you participants here today. And so we are going to drop the link for the survey in the chat. While we're doing that, there is a Q&A question for you, Lisa, and it's Denise that says, you mentioned when talking about acceptance that we spend 80% of our brain on something during that process. Can you repeat that? When we are doing what we are spending 80% of our time on.
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, when stuff comes at us, our brain goes to being angry, frustrated about things that we don't have any control over. So most of our energy, unless we consciously reshift, goes towards having being angry, frustrated about something, some war, some event, something horrible that we actually don't have any control over. So really the idea is that so much of our brain is focused on things we actually don't have control or influence over. And so we have to intentionally shift it. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.